You're listening to the Atlanta Sports Podcasts, your weekly podcast for all things Atlanta sports. From the Atlanta Braves, Atlanta Falcons, and the Atlanta Hawks, to the Georgia Bulldogs and Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, we have you covered on the best podcast for Atlanta sports. Alright, welcome back. I want to thank you for joining us today on the Atlanta Sports Podcast. My name is Frankie Maloof, and today we're going to have an interview with John Fricke. He's going to join us later on. In this part, we're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons, as this is our Atlanta Falcons episode. Then we're also going to have a second part of the episode, or second part of the interview, and it's going to be released in our Atlanta Hawks episode as well. So make sure you can go check that out. As always, on our website, atlantasportspodcasts.com. You can follow us on Twitter at ATLSportsCast. And you can leave us a review in the iTunes store. That would be great. Let us know how we're doing there. You can also sign up for our newsletter on our website. Again, it's atlantasportspodcast.com. So I'm going to start off with the interview right here. And remember to go check out the second part of this interview in our Atlanta Hawks episode, which will be released in a little bit. Now I am very happy to be joined by John Fricke from 92.9 The Game. And John, we're glad to have you with us today.
No, it's my pleasure.
So we're going to start off with the Atlanta Falcons. What do you see in this year's team that's different from the team that collapsed down the stretch last year?
Oh, a lot. The very first thing we noticed in training camp was speed. I still think, and I've told this on other stations. I was on a station in Denver prior to the Broncos game, on the San Diego prior to the Chargers game. And when I go on other stations around the country, I say, I believe this is the fastest team in the NFL. And I still stand by that. The total team speed is really hard for other teams to deal with. So you have guys who can absolutely fly. We're talking some of the fastest guys in the NFL, Julio Jones, Tevin Coleman, Aldrick Robinson, Taylor Gabriel, Des Trufant. These guys can flat run. The fastest linebacker in the NFL, probably Deion Jones. And that's borne out by the fact that, one of the stats they like to do is who is the fastest ball carrier in any given week in the open field in the NFL. It's something they track. And at least 3 times the Falcons have won that. So the team speed is really kind of jumps off the page, actually.
All right. Hello, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. The Falcons are 6-3. The Hawks are 6-2. Braves just picked up R.E. Dickey. Life is pretty good right now.
Yeah, it is pretty good. So the Falcons, they're performing really well so far, off to a good record. Do you think the defense has been a little bit of a concern this year?
Well, the defense is young. You'll hear Hugh Douglas on our show say the defense is getting better. I agree with you. The defense is just a young defense. How many first and second-year starters do you have out there? Grady Jarrett's a second-year guy. Vic Beasley's a second-year guy. They both got demonstrably better. Des Trufant's only a third, fourth-year guy. You have all these young rookies starting. There's no doubt that Keanu Neal is really making an impact. So he's played 7 NFL games. The 2 young linebackers in Campbell and Jones. The team is young on defense. And so much like the offense last year had to kind of come together and gel and be a unit, I think the defense will be better by the end of the year, and I expect that next year, with the addition of a couple of new players, maybe the health of, Sean Witherspoon told me he intends to play for another 4 or 5 years. He just got his cast off today. And that he intends to be back and then play for a number of years. So I expect that next year the defense will be among the better defenses in the NFL. It's just growing pains right now. But are they good enough to hold their own? Yeah, maybe, considering how good the offense is. But yes, that's the big thing that will keep the Falcons possibly from a Super Bowl title this year will be just the fact that the defense is young.
So Jacob Tamme was originally thought, at least in my opinion, to be kind of a filler guy between Tony Gonzalez, and now we have Austin Hooper, who's young still. But he's turned out to be much more than that. He's exceeded all my expectations. Do you think the Falcons will keep him around for more than just a mentor to Hooper?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No question. Of course, he's injured now, but Jacob was a player in the NFL and is a player. To compare Jacob Tamme to Tony Gonzalez is grossly unfair, because make an argument, Tony Gonzalez is the greatest tight end in the history of the game. He's right there in the conversation with Dave Casper and certainly, Gronkowski and, the great tight ends of all time, Kellen Winslow. That's what you're talking about when you're talking about Tony Gonzalez. So, just unfair to Jacob. I think Jacob Tamme is one of the top 10 to 12 tight ends in the game right now. So he's not a filler. It'll take Austin Hooper a couple, 3 years to become Jacob Tamme.
Yeah, Matt Ryan's, I think, in my opinion, having the best season of his career. Part of the reason is I think he's spraying the ball around so well. But, what do you think is maybe the reason for that?
It's just comfort in Kyle Shanahan. That's all it is. We heard a lot about, going down to Miami the offseason with the 27 players and And when you put in a new offense, it's always a struggle. And so they were having a difficult time with it last year, trying to get the timing down. The offensive line didn't have that straight, serious issues at centers. We know they used 3 different centers last year, so the timing was always a little off with the 3 different centers, and it just didn't quite click, And so once they started to click on offense towards the end of the year and then in the off season, when Matt Ryan got his timing down and everybody understood exactly where they had to go and how they had to block and what they had to do, which is why Alex Mack was the key addition to this team by far, not close, in the off season, because he had been in the Shanahan system, didn't have to learn the lingo, didn't have to learn his assignments, one of the best centers in the NFL, and that's what made everything hum for Matt Ryan. And Shanahan began to trust him and loosen the reins a little bit, so Matt could go up there and in the route tree that they have, he can make some adjustments, based on the coverage, and so he's able to audible a lot easier and audible into successful plays. So it's just a comfort level.
So Falcons general manager Thomas Dimitroff recently had his contract extended. What do you think of that move?
I think it's great. What do you guys think of it?
Well, he's done a good job. He's the best general manager that the Falcons have ever had. But some of it, like they fired Mike Smith because he's fallen on harder times with the team. So part of it was it's just taking a long time to rebuild after they had this successful run.
Yeah, there's part of it. And he was on the hook for that. So if when they fired Mike Smith, they didn't turn it around in a big hurry, which you could argue they have. They were 8-8 last year. They're 6-3 now, and they have turned it around. And really, just understand this is Dan Quinn's team. And when Dan Quinn was hired, he was given the reins of the team. So if Dan Quinn likes the general manager, and he does, and if Dan Quinn wants to keep, basically Mr. Blank is going to say, okay, Dan, this is your team until 2019 at least, because that's when your contract runs out. What do you want? And if Dan Quinn says, I want Thomas, Mr. Blank's going to say, okay, you got Thomas, which is exactly what happened.
So the Atlanta Falcons have spent the last couple of years trying to rebuild through the draft, and while it's not completely here yet, it's starting to get there, and a lot of improvements have been made. But based off the 2016 performance so far, what do you want the Falcons to grab in the upcoming draft to make this team even better?
Well, it depends on where they draft. It just depends on who's there. There's an offensive guard out of Indiana named Dan Feeney, who is probably one of the top 2 offensive guards in the NFL draft. He may be a late first-round pick. If he's there, another offensive guard to solidify that offensive line is the first place I'd look. But the Falcons also need help on defense still. They need help in the secondary. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with Jalen Collins the rest of the year, but they may need another cover corner, and they do need another rush end. And so, that's, I think, the 3 places I think are in most need at the moment: offensive guard, rush end, and cornerback.
So the Falcons are halfway through. Do you have a prediction for the second half of the season?
Well, I think they're going to win the Super Bowl, but that's just me. I think they're one of the 5 best teams in the NFL. Why not? What's your prediction? No, not a prediction. I have a desire. I don't know why they couldn't. There's no reason they can't. The only reason they can't is that they just don't. Could they win the Super Bowl? Well, who scares you? You afraid to play Dallas? I'm not. You afraid to play New England? I'm not. So, why not?
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think maybe the only team that would hold really tight with the Falcons is New England. I think otherwise there's not really a huge threat to this team.
Well, they're threats. The NFL is very balanced. Understand that, between, and everybody's overselling New England a little bit. They're a really good football team. I'm not saying they're not the number 1 team in the NFL because of Tom Brady and because of what they have. But, really the difference in the NFL between the very best team, if you call New England the best team, and Cleveland the very worst team, that may be, say, 17 points on the average. That's not much. And as you start to move up the ladder a little bit, the difference between the number 5 team in the NFL and the number 25 team is 2 or 3 points. It's a play. Look at the Philadelphia Eagles that they're going to play this week. Here's a team that's 4-4. All 4 losses have been in conference, but they lost by 1 point, 7 points, 6 points, and 5 points. Which is to say, if they made one more play in those 4 games, they'd be 8-0, and we'd be having a different conversation about the Philadelphia Eagles. That's how tight the NFL is. So, by and large, I think the Falcons are the hardest team to defend in the NFL right now, even with Tom Brady. This is the team that nobody really wants to play right now in the NFL. And because of that, if their defense does show signs of improvement, they become probably the toughest out. Look, any problems the Falcons have had this year have been of their own doing. Stupid penalties, dumb turnovers, things of that nature, red zone opportunities. If they get out of their own way, they're going to be really good.
All right, so again, that was an interview with John Fricke, the morning show host on 92.9 The Game. So we're going to talk a little bit right now about previewing the game versus the Eagles this weekend. Now, we didn't do a lot of that in the interview, but I'm going to do some of it right now. The Falcons are 6-3. They're currently in first place in the NFC South, and they're playing the Eagles this week, who are 4-4. So that 4-4 record is a little bit deceiving, though. As you heard John talk about in the interview, they lost several very close games. They lost to the Cowboys in OT. They lost to the Giants by 5 last week. So their record is a little bit deceiving of how good a team they are. They did start out 3-0, which was a little bit of a surprise. But now we know for sure they are a pretty good team. So here's some interesting notes. Their pass defense is 6th in the NFL. It only allows 218 yards per game through the air. And by contrast, Matt Ryan throws for over 300 yards per game pretty much every game. He has been a very consistent factor for the Falcons this season. So it'll be an interesting matchup. Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and all the receivers versus the Eagles secondary, which is a little beat up right now. And speaking of beat up secondaries, Desmond Trufant, who injured his shoulder in the game versus the Buccaneers last week, he has not been ruled out as of right now. As of the time I'm recording this, he has not been ruled out. So that's good news for Falcons fans. Now that's not saying he'll play, because he might not, but we'll have to see. And also Dwight Freeney is out for this week's game versus the Eagles with that quad injury. So that'll be interesting to see, who the Falcons had to step in next to him and who can make plays this weekend. And I want to thank you again for listening to the Atlanta Sports Podcast. Remember, you can check us out on Twitter. We're at ATL Sportscast. You can also find us on our website, atlantasportspodcast.com. You can find us in pretty much all of the major directories, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio. And, if you love Atlanta sports and you know somebody else that does too, let them know about us. Let them know about our podcast. Tell them to check us out on our website. You can also leave us a review in iTunes if you like the show, or even if you don't, just let us know how we're doing. You can also leave us a comment on our website, or you can contact us there if you have any questions or suggestions. And we hope to see you soon with another show.